From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. We start in Ecuador, where the Minister of the Interior, Cesar Navas, says 2 more people have been kidnapped by the armed group Oliver Sinistera near the border with Colombia. The couple has yet to be identified. During the press conference, Navas showed a video of the abducted couple and explained that this is the first time the front's leader, Huacho, has contacted the authorities directly with proof of life. President Lenin Moreno has called for a National Security Council meeting to discuss the matter.
We have to inform the country that, after communicating with Huacho yesterday night, we have learned about the kidnapping of 2 more citizens. We received a video of a couple that hasn't been identified yet. It's important to let you know this is the first time Huacho sends us a proof of life and communicates directly with us.
Yesterday, President Moreno gave a 10-day ultimatum to the armed group Oliver Sinistera to turn in their leader, Nunans Huacho. He is wanted for the kidnapping and killing of 2 journalists and their driver near the border with Colombia. Moreno said the front's leader will face death if the ultimatum isn't respected, and he added that his government will not stop until justice is achieved. Ecuador has resumed military operations along the Colombian border in an attempt to find Huacho and to improve security in the area.
We are giving them 10 days. 10 days for them to hand over El Huacho to us. He has chosen the wrong path and the wrong enemy, so we are going to bring him to justice.
And Foreign Minister Maria Fernanda Espinosa and the Minister of Defense, Patricio Zambrano, met their Colombian counterparts to discuss plans to improve security at the border. After the meeting, Espinosa said both countries are coordinating operations with their defense teams. For his part, Zambrano said the Ecuadorian government continues working with the Red Cross to recover the bodies of the 2 journalists and their driver who were killed last week.
The government of Ecuador wants to reassure people that we are backing every action from International Red Cross to recover the bodies of the 3 victims. We support every action and any request that the Committee of the International Red Cross makes to the national government to bring the bodies of our citizens back.
In Colombia, residents of the border town of Tumaco have warned of the risks they may face if the governments of Ecuador and Colombia begin military action in the area. Residents of Altamira and Frontera and human rights organizations say civilians living in the area will be at high risk. The Ecuadorian authorities say the military is needed to capture the leader of Olivier Sinistera, Huacho, after his group kidnapped and killed 3 workers from the El Comercio newspaper last week. And Colombia's Attorney General has given the U.S. authorities 60 days to present an extradition request for the former FARC leader, Jesus Santrich. Santrich's case will then be filed with the Special Jurisdiction for Peace to discuss. The U.S. is seeking Santrich and 10 others under accusations of drug trafficking committed after the signing of the peace process, which was signed in 2016. His lawyers say that Santrich has never been a drug dealer. The DEA, however, says Santrich led an operation that sent 10,000 kilos of cocaine to the United States. And still in Colombia, former presidential candidate Piedad Cordoba has spoken out against political discrimination against women. Speaking at the Freer Lives Without Fear event, Cordoba called on the international community to take a stand against discrimination and asked Colombian women to reflect on the obstacles they continue to face. On Monday, Cordoba made an official complaint to the prosecutor's office following her withdrawal from the presidential race. She said she faced discrimination, including not being invited to presidential debates.
I will make sure this complaint reaches the Organizations of American States and the UN, so they release a statement about my absence from those debates. I'm doing this so that women in this country wake up and reflect, because many of us talk about sisterhood, but talking about it and acting on it are 2 different things, and many women only do the former.
In Brazil, senators from the Commission of Human Rights will visit former President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva to check on his condition. In the meantime, 4 Brazilian parties have published a joint statement rejecting Lula's imprisonment. The Brazil Workers' Party, the Democratic Labour Party, the Socialism and Liberty Party, along with the Communist Party of Brazil, says Lula da Silva's arrest was in violation of the federal constitution. They argue it breaks with international human rights treaties, which establishes the presumption of innocence and due process. And in the Brazilian city of Curitiba, the Lula Libre camp has agreed to move the camp to another space near the police headquarters, where Lula is being held. The organizers of the pro-Lula vigil will be fined $150,000 if the agreement to move is not respected. Telesur interviewed the Workers' Party president, Dauta Racina, on the issue.
On top of being threatened with a fine of about $150,000, we are also being accused of criminal actions. We want an agreement with the authorities, but we are still going to continue with our vigil every day. The campsite will be dismantled, but we are not going away. The people will remain, and we will continue with the vigil.
And members of Brazil Homeless Workers Movement, or the MTST, have occupied an apartment that prosecutors accuse Lula da Silva of receiving as part of an alleged bribe. The case was built around this Guarujá, Sao Paulo apartment, and it's what led to his 12-year prison sentence and arrest. The protesters occupied the unit for several hours, displaying banners that said, "If this belongs to Lula, it belongs to the people, and if it doesn't, why is he in prison?" The demonstrators were eventually evicted after police threatened to detain them, although an eviction order was never ordered by the owners. Lula has repeatedly denied acquiring the apartment and says there's no evidence to prove that he owns it. And still in Brazil, the government says that it is very likely the Rio de Janeiro police were involved in the murder of social activist Marielle Franco and her driver last month. Following her murder, the government is under pressure to find her killers. Now, no one has been arrested in the case. Franco was known for denouncing the illegal activities of the police and defending the rights of poor communities against police brutality and corruption. In Paraguay, the 2 leading candidates in the presidential election say they will reform the country's legal system if elected. The candidate for the ruling Colorado Party, Mario Abdo Benitez, and the opposition candidate, Efrain Alegre, announced their proposals during a TV debate on Sunday. They say they hope to create reforms that will tackle corruption and give confidence to foreign investors.
Karina and Carlos are members of the Secondary School Students' Union. They'll be voting for the first time on April the 22nd. They're taking advantage of the election to campaign for better education, and they listened carefully to the debate between the presidential candidates.
It had a big impact among young people, on social media and so forth. You could see the difference between the candidates. One who could barely string his sentences together, whose ideas were feeble, and another who seemed rather more confident within the limits of the current political situation we face.
For these young student leaders, the difference between the candidates was not just what they had to say, but how they said it. They were critical of the conservative candidate from the Colorado Party.
A candidate who had no concrete ideas and looked like he was reading or presenting a 6th grade assignment. That was the candidate Marito, while Efrain, I think, didn't have enough time to really speak and develop his ideas more clearly.
The government candidate, Mario Abdo Benitez, is the son of the right-hand man to the dictator Alfredo Stroessner, widely accused of torture, murder and disappearances.
In fact, human rights have figured very little in the whole campaign. I was struck by the fact that both candidates seemed frightened of touching a number of other issues that it would have been interesting to develop, like abortion or sex education in schools.
The media had already made clear that the format of the debate would not permit a direct confrontation between the candidates.
2 very conservative perspectives, formally democratic, but in many ways very similar, in a style of debate which precluded any big surprises.
With just a few days to go, most people's expectations are muted for these elections, which will decide not only the presidency of Paraguay, but the makeup of Congress and regional governments as well.
We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. The president of the Venezuelan National Electoral Council, Tibisay Lucena, is in Tunisia to talk about the strengths of the Venezuelan electoral system. During a meeting with African and European social organizations, Lucena talked about the legitimacy of the upcoming Venezuelan elections. She referred to the Venezuelan electoral system as one of the best in the world.
The electoral system last few years, we have built an automated system. The vote in Venezuela is 100% automated, and we do that through the auditing offices and also the certification that political parties give for the proper functioning of the electoral process, which guarantee the transparency and the reliability of Venezuelan electoral system.
Now, despite his unpopularity, U.S. President Donald Trump has some notable allies who have aligned themselves to his stance against Venezuela. Freddie Gillingham pays particular attention to one of those countries, Canada.
Incumbent Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau, was one of several leaders meeting in Peru over the weekend. Canada has joined the US and other right-wing countries in the region in taking an even more hostile stance against Venezuela.
That the suffering and the violence and the humanitarian crisis they are undergoing needs to cease. It starts with delivering humanitarian aid, but it also requires more and more voices from the region to stand in solidarity in favor of the Venezuelan people who are suffering.
The Trudeau government is playing a leading role in economic sanctions against Venezuela, which are cutting off the Venezuelan government's access to dollars, which is the hard currency needed to buy medicine and basic goods. We spoke to political analyst Diego Sequeira to find out a bit more about what the Canadian government's agenda could be.
And you can see from that point of view, on the obvious side, they're dealing with all the human rights mantra portfolio. Actually, they can do it even better than, and discreetly and even more elegantly than the U.S. does it right now. But still, in the big picture, it complies to what the main agenda, global agenda is against Venezuela. And why is that? And you have the main Canadians mining companies very interested in what's called the mining arch, especially now that Venezuela owns the fourth main gold reserve worldwide.
Canada joined the US and others in declaring they won't be recognizing Venezuela's presidential election result in May. But Canada remains in support of Brazil, whose president, Michel Temer, has no real electoral legitimacy. Although touted by Western media as a liberal saviour next to Donald Trump, some of Trudeau's other policies are far from innocent and are having serious repercussions south of the border. Freddie Gillingham, Telesur, Caracas.
Cuba's new National Assembly of Popular Power will meet for the first time this Wednesday, a day earlier than planned. The meeting will elect a new leadership for the Parliament and the Council of State. This in turn will choose a new president, as Raul Castro is stepping down. Our correspondent in Havana, Laura Prada, has more.
Hello, yes, thank you. Nice to greet you. Indeed, today was announced that the Cuban National Assembly on its 9th legislature will take place one day earlier than expected, on the 18th of April and the 19th of April. On these 2 days will be taking place the oath of the 605 deputies just elected in the month of March, and the election of the main charges of the National Assembly. After this vote, this secret vote, will be taking place also another votation after the National Assembly settles with its main figures. And this is the presentation by the Candidature Commission of the 31 members of the State Council, and then the election of the President, the first Vice President, and the other Vice Presidents of Cuba. This will be the final part of the general election process in Cuba that started on the month of November. And we'll be telling you more what goes on here in Cuba.
Thank you, Laura Prada, for that report. Bolivian President Evo Morales has decried the threats posed by capitalism to indigenous communities and the environment. During the United Nations Forums on Indigenous Issues, which was held in New York, Morales said that indigenous communities are in danger as resources are controlled by a few corporations, and since capitalism doesn't recognize the rights of nature. He added that the earth must not be used as a commodity. He also reminded the forum that it was Bolivia and Latin America that defended their natural resources and gave them back to their people. Morales asked the UN to guarantee the rights of Mother Earth in order to guarantee the life of future generations and to respect the experience of their ancestors. The British Labour Party MP David Lammy has criticised the UK Home Secretary for the deportations of British citizens who came from the Caribbean as part of the Windrush generation. The SS Windrush was the name of one of the first ships to bring Caribbean nationals to the United Kingdom. David Lammy, himself the child of Guyanese immigrant parents, called on the Home Secretary to explain.
When my parents and their generation arrived in this country under the Nationality Act of 1948, they arrived here as British citizens. It is inhumane and cruel for so many of that Windrush generation to have suffered so long in this condition, and for the Secretary of State only to have made a statement today on this issue. Can she explain how many have been deported? She suggested earlier that she would ask the High Commissioners. It is her department that has deported them. She should know the number. Can she tell the House how many have been detained as prisoners in their own country? Can she tell the House how many have been denied health under the National Health Service? How many have denied pensions? How many have lost their job? This is a day of national shame.
Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May has apologized to Caribbean leaders. She said she was genuinely sorry about the anxiety caused by the Home Office threatening the children of Commonwealth citizens with deportations. Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness said he had accepted Theresa May's apology.
I think that we do have common ground to build, and looking forward to explore those. The traditional areas of security, economic, trade, new areas, climate change, migration.
We're going to take a short break now, but join us again after this look at what our multimedia colleagues are reporting. Welcome back. 7 inmates have been killed and another 17 injured in a prison riot in South Carolina in the United States. The incident happened at the Lee Correctional Institution in Bishopsville. It's South Carolina's largest maximum security prison. It lasted 8 hours and is the deadliest prison riot in the United States in 25 years. The riot was caused by gang-related disputes and most of the victims died of stab wounds. Alexander Shulgin, the Russian OPCW representative, has said that Russia has distributed visual materials at the OPCW Executive Council meeting to prove that the incident in Dalma was of a staged character. While speaking at The Hague on Monday, Shulgin stated that Western countries are refusing to hear arguments voiced by the Russian side. Shulgin also expressed doubts that Washington and London had actually managed to hit any actual secret chemical weapon facilities in Syria, as no traces of chemical contamination had been detected after the missile strikes.
Today at the OPCW Executive Council meeting, we have distributed visual materials to prove the incident in Duma was of a staged character, in fact. The same children that performed as victims moved from one room to another. I repeat that our vis-a-vis from Western countries, especially NATO member states and from the European Union as well, chained together with bloc discipline, don't want or cannot hear us. They don't take our argumentation, so it's a conversation with deaf people. Moreover, these countries take liberties of making insults on Syria and blame us in obstructing work of experts of the Organization for Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. But it's just the opposite, as it's the Americans, who are trying to tie up a full-scale investigation. What other explanation could be made for the treacherous strikes against Syria by the United States, Great Britain and France in that particular moment, when a group of experts were getting ready to drive from Beirut to Damascus? Isn't it an attempt to encumber the investigation?
A Syrian civilian who was recently freed from insurgent captivity in newly liberated Douma has revealed how militants allegedly forced him to participate in staged chemical weapons attack scene that they then filmed way back in 2015.
The militants gathered us and forced us to take our shirts off and then said, "The army is about to use chemical weapons. You should pretend chemical weapons were used against you and that you cannot breathe. We will pour water on you to revive you." There was a doctor with us, kidnapped from the industrial city. His name was George Mahul. He is a Christian. He was forced to fill syringes and pretend that he was injecting us to revive us. They, the militants, then poured water on us and forced us to pretend that we were unconscious according to their wish. They brought a camera and filmed us. Then they got us inside. I said to myself, we might be killed, but thank God we survived.
And we end with the news that Kendrick Lamar's album Damn has won the Pulitzer Prize for Music. This is the first non-classical or jazz work to win the award. The 30-year-old rapper has won 11 Grammys. The album Damn has been praised by Rolling Stone magazine as a brilliant combination of the timeless and the modern, the old school and the next level. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. But for these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisyourtv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Tell Us Your English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you so much for watching.